those years in which it's damn near impossible to choose the best single match out of the previous 365 days? Multiply the scope by 10 and you'll see the challenge we laid out for ourselves here. How does one look at a range of 3,652 days in which there have been tens of thousands of wrestling matches, many of them top shelf quality, and choose the very best among them? It's an insane, brain-clawing endeavor. Even narrowing the list down to the matches that captivated you the most doesn't make it any easier, because eventually you're left with, roughly 108 matches to sift through? You can't leave this one out because you'd be doing it a disservice, but you got to include this one for historical significance. Can't leave the obvious choices out either, because picking just the sleeper hits disqualifies the ones who deserve it most. How does one come up with this list? Well, we here at Cultaholic, with a little help from our friends, engaged this towering beast head on and determined what we feel are the very best matches of the previous 10 years. And we're sure that you'll agree that we got this list completely wrong. Come on guys, this was really hard. But first, a few honourable mentions. Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega at Dominion 2017, Will Ospreay versus Shingo Takagi at Best of the Super Juniors 26, DIY versus The Revival at NXT TakeOver Toronto, Shinsuke Nakamura versus Kota Ibushi at Wrestle Kingdom 9, and Randy Orton versus Daniel Bryan versus Batista at WrestleMania 30. Without any further ado, I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic.com, and these are the 10 greatest wrestling matches of the 2010s. Join us! Number 10, Kazuchika Okada versus Katsuyori Shibata at Sakura Genesis 2017. This match has gained notoriety for causing the probable end of Shibata's career, due to a subdural hematoma sustained through the use of repeated headbutts. Combined with dehydration, Shibata experienced paralysis on the right side of his body, and he collapsed in the locker room following the 38-minute clash. While Shibata's harrowing predicament does cast a heavy cloud over the match, the bout itself is incredible, adeptly told with plenty of backstory. Shibata sought redemption, finally earning a championship bout with Okada after returning to New Japan 5 years earlier. He had a chance to finally make good on his long-standing promise, and in the match, he seemed to have the younger Rainmaker's number. Shibata out-wrestled the Rainmaker for lengthy stretches, even humbling him in parts. Shibata left it all in the ring, but the resilient and artful Okada managed to withstand so much punishment before polishing Shibata off to retain his belt. The heartbreaking postscript has, in its own way, enhanced the legend of this match, tacking on a bittersweet ending to what had been an extraordinary battle. Number 9, Sasha Banks versus BAYLEY at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. It can be argued that this is the greatest women's match to ever fall under the WWE header, and 4 years later, its memory and significance remain strong. The naive yet determined BAYLEY was a perfect foil to the conniving, self-absorbed Banks, and at long last, Brooklyn's Barclays Center looked to be the site of BAYLEY's crowning achievement. Despite Banks already graduating to the main roster, she was still going to give her NXT colleague the fight of her life. While the main roster counterpart was paying lip service to a Stephanie McMahon-endorsed revolution, NXT demonstrated evolution without the forced labels as Banks and BAYLEY tore into each other in an aggressive and emotional showcase that Finn Balor and Kevin Owens struggled to try to follow. The cathartic ending with BAYLEY finally getting her moment in the sun was the cherry on top, the satisfying conclusion to what had been a highly engaging and rewarding match that topped the overall weekend leaderboard. Faced with the largest crowd either had wrestled in front of before, and with 18 minutes to work, Sasha Banks and BAYLEY each delivered career-affirming performances. Number 8, Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa at NXT TakeOver New Orleans. If the last few years have taught us nothing else, it's to expect abject insanity when the words unsanctioned enter our ears. While Gargano and Ciampa's dance of death on WrestleMania 34 weekend didn't quite become the roving crime scene that was Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega, the hatred between the two was palpable enough to use as a blunt weapon itself. Gargano, fighting to get his job back, was finally going to get his hands on the treacherous Blackheart. Ciampa's natural dickheadery clashed with a Gargano that willfully sunk to his old partner's depths in fighting back, with crutches, knee braces, bare concrete, and the sort of desperate underhandedness you resort to when fighting for your life. After more than half an hour of getting the hatred out and a million callbacks to their shared history, we get the finish. Gargano showing apparent weakness when his former friend pleads for mercy, letting his guard down just enough to trigger Ciampa's attempted con before Gargano ripped Ciampa apart through a poetic submission finish. From start to finish, it is an emotional roller coaster. Number 7, Hiroshi Tanahashi vs Kazuchika Okada at Invasion Attack 2013. Picking the best Tanahashi-Okada match is like choosing the shiniest ring at the jewelry store. Where do you start? In the eyes of many, Okada's tangle with IWGP champion Tanahashi at Sumo Hall was their most epic battle. Over a year earlier, an ascendant Okada had beaten Tanahashi for the gold in something of an upset, but dropped it back to New Japan's unquestioned ace months later. Was that victory a fluke? Tanahashi's subsequent wins over Okada seem to indicate as much. Okada won the 2013 New Japan Cup to earn this shot at the title, in which Tanahashi worked feverishly over Okada's arm, doing all he could to nullify the dreaded Rainmaker. When Okada couldn't lift the arm during an attempted pose, it seemed the strategy had worked. Ultimately, Okada did land the Rainmaker, but sure enough, he was too pained to make the cover. Summoning his reserve, Okada survived the high fly flow and bounced back with a tombstone, followed by the Rainmaker to capture his second IWGP heavyweight crown. Each subsequent match only enhanced Okada's burgeoning legend, with this encounter affirming his Pantheon-level status. Number 6, The Undertaker vs Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 26. In our hearts, we all kind of figured this was HBK's swan song. In story, he felt the need to show the world he could beat The Undertaker on the WrestleMania stage, agreeing to wager his career for the opportunity. At 44 years of age, with an endless array of remarkable performances to his name and more match of the night honors than he has pores on his skin, Shawn Michaels had nothing left to prove, except that he still had it. In true showstopper fashion, Michaels delivered one more magnum opus alongside one of his greatest professional rivals, coming very close to equaling the rare brilliance that their match 1 year earlier had achieved. Even knowing that this was probably it for Michaels, we still bought into every near fall, every bit of second wind, and every moment of hope, up until Michaels painfully concedes to Undertaker, demanding to go out in a blaze of glory. Other Mania matches may have worn the end of an era label, but it's most apt when applied to the last time Shawn Michaels proved to be the truest Mr. WrestleMania. Number 5, Volta vs Tyler Bate at NXT UK TakeOver Cardiff. For many years, Sting vs Vader stood in as the wrestling archetype of David vs Goliath, the noble mortal versus the mythical beast. Older fans should forgive the ensuing generations for considering Bate vs Volta the gold standard of that trope, because the brilliance in their NXT UK title bout this past August is more than enough to assume that mantle. These are two athletes who do no wrong, and against each other, they're doubly perfect. Bate's impeccable strength for a wrestler of his size was put to the test against Volta, and you know the crowd is hooked on the story when a simple body slam from Bate earns an enormous response. Volta has a way of making all of his opponents into overmatched underdogs just like Vader before him, but Bate's particular gallantry matches up against the unsinkable monster better than the rest. Try as Bate did, he just couldn't undercome Volta's fury, though Volta did have to resort to overkill to take down the smaller yet stubborn foe. The storytelling and physical execution are off the charts, setting new standards for such matches of the type going forward. Number 4, Kazuchika Okada vs Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom 11. Thinking that this IWGP heavyweight title match was going to achieve subjective perfection wasn't much of a gamble. Believing they had 3 sequels in them that could potentially relegate this clash to 4th on a depth chart with 4 spots sounds a wee bit crazy. But ranking the 4 Okada vs Omega matches has no real wrong answer, though the original clearly holds up as a seminal production. With a G1 Climax victory in hand, Omega ascended to this new challenge, probably not realizing he'd soon at least equal Tanahashi as Okada's greatest foe. The 40-plus minute match began slow, escalating with every high risk on Omega's part. Seeing this as his chance to reach the pinnacle of the sport, Omega threw more and more outlandish risks at the reigning champion to try to wrest away the gold. The table spot, the avalanche dragon suplex, the repeated attempts at the one-winged angel, which Okada desperately kept staving off. The champion countered with multiple rainmakers, a tombstone, and one more rainmaker for good measure. Omega may have come up short in this bite at the apple, but more importantly, he proved he belonged in the same realm as his deified opponent. Number 3, Cody Rhodes vs Dustin Rhodes at Double or Nothing. When the 50-year-old Goldust was announced as his brother's opponent for AEW's first ever event, most agreed that the promos were swell, but the idea of the match didn't quite have the Asterix crowd in a frenzy. 4 years earlier, the two underwhelmed at WWE Fastlane, and a planned WrestleMania clash was scrapped. Even with the ability to tell their own story without handcuffs in AEW, few had the match tabbed as a potential match of the night or year. That was until they saw it. The majority weren't expecting a blood-soaked grudge match straight out of an early 80s Southern Territory, a contemporary take on those gritty battles of yore. At 50, Dustin has arguably never had a better match, the old gunslinger refusing to be put out to pasture by his hungry, enterprising kid brother. And for Cody, a supposed dispenser of so-so matches that exist under an apparent ceiling, he broke out as a genuine superstar through his own performance that night. When all was said and done, the brothers came together as one in a tear-jerking moment, both knowing that their legendary father was watching from afar, proud of his boys in their finest hour. Number 2, Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega at Dominion 2018. 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw. That's what each man had against the other entering the figurative rubber match as Okada crept up on 2 full years as IWGP Heavyweight Champion. This time, there would be no draw. The time limit waived to go along with a 2 out of 3 fall stipulation that necessitated beating the other daunting foe twice. It took more than 65 minutes, but finally, Kenny Omega reached the mountaintop. Whether it's 7 stars or not, it's considered by many to be the true high point of a rivalry that transcends the very idea of what a great wrestling match is. With Omega the zealous aggressor and Okada the poised ring general, as is their custom, they warred for over 1 hour, Okada taking the first fall with a deft counter, thus putting a desperate Omega behind the 8 ball. But Omega fought back, pummeling Okada before pinning him in straight falls with the one-winged angel that served as Okada's kryptonite. The long chase was over, following a dual performance for the ages. Topping the magnificence of their earlier bouts seemed to be mission impossible, but Omega and Okada gave everything they had in finding a way. Number 1, John Cena versus CM Punk at Money in the Bank 2011. Recency bias could arguably play a role in the placement of some items in this video, which is why Cena versus Punk at number 1 feels all the more special. 9 years later, the people who saw it remember exactly how they felt witnessing it in the moment. When Punk vowed to get one over on his supposedly tyrannical overlords by leaving with their belt in front of his Windy City friends and neighbors no less, the stage was set for one of the most intense matches in WWE history. There was Cena and Punk, going move for move in a game of physical chess that many assumed was beyond the polarizing Cena's grasp. There were Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis on standby, waiting to assert control if things didn't go their way. Nobody knew how it was going to end or what to expect, and the drama was enough to make you tug at your hair. When Punk ultimately beat the system not only once, pinning Cena clean, but twice escaping with the belt before an attempted screwjob, the feeling was incomprehensible. Punk's master plan was achieved after one of the greatest WWE matches of all time, and in our eyes, the best wrestling match throughout all of the 2010s.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.